Imagine eating every meal without salt. Not for a day, not for a week, for your entire life. No salt shaker, no supermarkets, no restaurants, no processed food, no potato chips, no canned soup. Yet somehow, our ancestors survived for hundreds of thousands of years. How? Where did ancient humans find one of the most essential minerals the human body needs? The answer is far more surprising than most people imagine. Today, salt seems almost invisible. A small white crystal sitting quietly on the dinner table. Cheap. Everywhere. Easy to forget. But for most of human history, salt was anything but ordinary. Entire trade routes were built around it. Kingdoms fought wars to control it. Some workers were even paid with it. Before we understand why salt became so valuable, we first need to ask a simpler question. Did ancient humans actually need salt? The answer is absolutely yes. Every human cell depends on sodium. Without it, nerves cannot send electrical signals properly. Muscles struggle to contract. The heart cannot beat normally. The body loses its ability to regulate water. Blood pressure becomes unstable. Too little sodium can lead to weakness, confusion, painful muscle cramps, and in severe cases, death. Salt is not a luxury. It is a biological necessity. But here comes the first surprise. Ancient humans probably needed far less added salt than we do today. Why? Because their diets were completely different. Modern people consume enormous amounts of processed foods. Bread, cheese, fast food, frozen meals, packaged snacks, instant noodles. Most of these foods contain large amounts of added salt. Our ancestors had none of them. Instead, hunter-gatherers lived almost entirely on wild foods. Fresh meat, fish, birds, eggs, wild fruits, nuts, seeds, roots, leaves. Many of these foods naturally contain sodium. Fresh animal meat already provides enough sodium for the human body. Blood contains even more. Organs such as the liver, kidneys, and heart are especially rich in essential minerals. When a hunting group successfully killed a large animal, they consumed far more than just muscle. Almost every edible part was used. Nothing valuable was wasted. Bone marrow supplied fat, organs supplied vitamins and minerals. Blood itself contributed important nutrients. Together, these foods naturally provided much of the sodium prehistoric humans required. In other words, for much of human evolution, people may not have needed to search specifically for salt at all. Their food brought salt to them. This also explains something curious about many wild animals today. Carnivores rarely seek out salt. Lions almost never visit salt licks. Wolves rarely need them. Large cats obtain most of their sodium directly from the animals they hunt. Herbivores are different. Plants generally contain much less sodium than meat. As a result, deer, elephants, buffalo, moose, and mountain goats often travel long distances searching for natural salt deposits. These places are known as salt licks. Animals return to them again and again, sometimes for generations. And ancient humans noticed. Long before chemistry, long before nutrition, long before anyone understood sodium, our ancestors became extraordinary observers of nature. They watched where animals traveled. They learned which places attracted entire herds. Sometimes, those places held something far more valuable than fresh water. They held salt. That discovery would quietly reshape the future of humanity. For tens of thousands of years, hunter-gatherers obtained most of the sodium they needed from the animals they hunted. Then, everything changed. Around 12,000 years ago, human societies began one of the greatest transformations in history: agriculture. Instead of following migrating herds across vast landscapes, people began planting crops: wheat, barley, rice, millet, corn. Villages gradually replaced temporary camps. Permanent settlements appeared. Population increased. For the first time, large numbers of people relied heavily on grains rather than wild game. This revolution fed millions, but it also created a new nutritional challenge. Plants generally contain much less sodium than meat. A farming family eating mostly cereals consumed far less natural sodium than earlier hunter-gatherers. Salt, once quietly supplied by fresh animal foods, became something people increasingly needed to find. And so began humanity's long search for one of Earth's simplest minerals. Fortunately, nature had already hidden clues. Wild animals knew where salt could be found. Across Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas, herds regularly traveled to strange places where the ground tasted different. Natural salt springs, mineral-rich wetlands, rock outcrops, dry lake beds. These locations became known as salt licks. Elephants dig enormous holes searching for mineral-rich soil. Deer repeatedly visit the same patches of exposed earth. Mountain goats climb dangerous cliffs to lick mineral deposits from exposed rock. Even parrots in the Amazon gather at clay cliffs rich in essential minerals. To early humans, these places became remarkable opportunities. Finding a salt lick often meant finding animals, and finding animals often meant finding food. Hunters quickly realized that following animal trails could lead not only to successful hunts, but also to reliable sources of valuable minerals. Long before geology, people were reading landscapes through the behavior of wildlife. Eventually, they began collecting salt directly. Some communities gathered salty soil and dissolved it in water before evaporating the liquid. Others collected naturally dried salt crystals left behind after seasonal lakes shrank beneath the sun. Coastal communities discovered another remarkable possibility: seawater. Every liter contains dissolved salt. By allowing seawater to evaporate in shallow pools, or later by boiling it in clay vessels, people could recover the white crystals left behind. It was slow, labor-intensive, but incredibly valuable. Archaeology shows that organized salt production appeared surprisingly early. Excavations in several parts of Europe have uncovered evidence of salt extraction dating back more than 7,000 years. In what is now Romania, prehistoric communities evaporated naturally salty spring water using ceramic containers. Similar discoveries have been found throughout China, Central Europe, and the Near East. Salt production gradually became one of humanity's earliest specialized industries. The more people depended on agriculture, the more important salt became. But salt offered another extraordinary advantage. It could preserve food. Fresh meat spoils quickly, especially during warm weather. Before refrigeration, this limited how much food could be stored. Salt changed everything. When meat or fish was packed with salt, water left the tissues. Many bacteria could no longer survive. Food lasted weeks, sometimes months, instead of days. Communities could survive harsh winters more easily. Fishing villages could transport their catch inland. Hunters could preserve successful harvests. Entire populations became less vulnerable to seasonal shortages. A tiny white crystal had quietly become one of civilization's greatest technologies, and its influence was only beginning. Eventually, salt became far more than food. It became power. As civilizations grew larger, their demand for salt continued rising. Not only because people needed it to survive, but because entire economies began depending on it. Salt preserved fish. Salt preserved meat. Salt preserved cheese. Salt allowed food to travel hundreds of kilometers without spoiling. For the first time, communities no longer depended entirely on eating what had been hunted or harvested that very day. Surpluses became possible. Trade expanded. Cities grew. Entire civilizations became connected by one remarkably ordinary mineral. Across Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas, people built roads leading to salt deposits. Caravans crossed deserts carrying blocks of salt instead of gold. Ships transported enormous quantities of sea salt between distant ports. Some ancient trade routes existed almost entirely because of salt. Even language still remembers its importance. The English word salary is often linked to the Latin word salarium, a payment associated with salt during the Roman era. Although historians continue debating exactly how Roman soldiers received this payment, the connection reveals how valuable salt had become. For thousands of years, people referred to salt as white gold in some regions. It truly was. Entire kingdoms fought to control salt mines. Governments taxed salt to finance armies. Empires competed for access to rich mineral deposits. One simple crystal influenced politics, economics, and history on a remarkable scale. Yet perhaps the most fascinating part of this story began long before any empire existed. Long before roads. Long before merchants. Long before written language. Our ancestors had already learned one extraordinary lesson. Nature leaves clues. Animals knew where the salt was. Humans simply learned to pay attention. A herd of deer visiting the same clearing year after year might not only reveal tomorrow's hunt, it might reveal tomorrow's source of survival. The same curiosity that taught humans to follow migrating animals, discover edible plants, predict changing seasons, and master fire, also taught them where to find one of Earth's most important minerals. The next time you sprinkle a little salt onto your dinner, pause for a moment. Those tiny white crystals represent one of the oldest relationships between humans and the natural world. Long before supermarkets, long before salt shakers, long before industrial mining, people crossed mountains, followed animal trails, collected seawater, boiled mineral springs, and searched dry lake beds for the same substance sitting quietly beside your plate today. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about salt isn't that every human body depends on it. It's that such a small mineral quietly shaped where people settled, what they hunted, how they preserved food, which trade routes connected civilizations, and even which wars were fought. A single pinch of salt weighs almost nothing. Yet across thousands of years, it helped build cities. It connected continents. It transformed economies. And without ever realizing it, every time we season a meal, we are repeating a habit that stretches back to the very beginning of human history. Sometimes, the smallest things leave the greatest mark on civilization.